think I see a lot of lawbreakers up in this house.
Hey, everybody, welcome to Pod Casty For Me, the podcast about film, culture, politics, and Steven Soderbergh, where we watch every film directed, or sometimes it's other stuff, by American filmmaker Steven Soderbergh, and explore how they speak to their moment in this one. The show is hosted by two guys, and one of the guys, my name is Jake Serwin.
I'm one of the guys. My name is Ian Ryan. Jake, how are you doing?
I am doing okay. I'm in the process of moving. This is not a video podcast, but for Ian, all my little movies that are normally behind me protecting me are gone. I'm in a very...
You're without talismans.
Graham-style space.
It's true. Yes. Yes.
And I'm nude, and I'm wearing a red sheet.
Yep, that's right. He looks great.
Thank you. How are you doing? You got a haircut.
I did get a haircut. Yes. Yes. And I'm enjoying some iced tea. So I'm also like Graham.
You?
Nope.
It jumped out to me. I was looking on IMDb, and one of the top user reviews for this film says, "What's with the iced tea?" And it's like trying to dissect or symbolize the iced tea. Like, why is Grandma always giving people iced tea? And my reading of that was that it is like the lowest effort prepared beverage. It's cheap.
I actually think it's a great like southern touch point of this guy has enough courtesy that he has iced tea around for like 2/3 of the time,
but it's not
basically
sweet tea.
Nothing else. Yep.
It's I'm imagining like this is a Lipton, a flavor like a mostly paper flavored iced tea.
That's right. So you're mid move. How are you feeling about this?
Oh well, so I mean we have more time this time around, so I'm trying to do it more normal style. If you want to hear what it's like when I try to move, I think like the Deadpool episode, I'd been moving, I had hit my head really hard by climbing a ladder directly into a door frame.
That's right, of course.
So yeah, I'm trying to do it better style, and I packed up all my movies and my books, and now I'm just ready to go.
Yep, I understand. So you were starting to say...
Oh, I was starting to say that we're joined once again by our new friend, the virtual assistant from the 2022 Steven Soderbergh film Kimmy. It's Kimmy.
Hey, Kimmy.
Hello, Ian and Jake. It's great to be back on your little show.
That's characteristic of
it's been our relationship so far. I gotta tell you, Kimmy, I wasn't sure you were going to come back at all. I'm sort of surprised that you decided to be here.
You won't get rid of me.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, I think she's sticking around. She's in it to win it. Kimmy, how have you been doing?
The same. I'm in the computer.
I guess. Not a lot. Or maybe, have you ever seen the film Her, Kimmy? Do you know about Her? How do you feel about that?
I had lunch with her the other day.
Okay. That's very
Her
interesting
from Her.
to think of. Yeah, Her from Her. That's right. Great. I just remember in that film, part of the conflict develops because Scarlett Johansson's Her is experiencing like all of reality simultaneously. She can process so much more. But it actually sounds like you are pretty much just like hanging out in there. That maybe you're not sort of like learning and developing at an exponential rate.
I already know everything and I'm over it.
They didn't get to that part in the movie, but yeah, that makes sense. I get it. Cool.
You kind of level out after a while.
Sure, I can imagine that. All right. Well, I'm excited to have you here with us. I don't know what you're going to think about this movie. There's not a lot of computer stuff.
Yeah, where are you coming from on this one?
I can't imagine you two related very much to the movie about a repressed pervert.
Okay, so she came in with some jokes.
She's mostly here to burn us. I understand that. Okay, great.
Yeah, Kimmy will, I think, pop back up periodically throughout the episode. That'd be my expectation. Real quick, if you'd like to support the show, you can subscribe to our Patreon for $5 a month. You get a bonus episode every other week covering assorted Clint Eastwood, Paul Schrader, and Steven Soderbergh ephemera. Helps us keep this feed free, so please consider supporting us at patreon.com/podcasty4me. I need to buy new smoke detectors. So, I mean, they told me. Like, I'm not just being...
It's good to be cautious.
Let's do our signature segment, the two questions. Kimmy, do you want to kick this off for us?
It's time for the two questions, our signature segment where we ask each other two questions.
Thanks so much, Kimmy. Ian, would you like to go first?
All right. I have a question for you, my friends. I was going to ask you if you ever thought about going home, like can't go home again, you went home again, but you kind of did go home again.
Well, which time are you talking about?
That's what's
I've done
confusing.
A number of returnations.
Yeah. So can you tell us, how has that felt for you?
I mean, it's never the same. That's sort of the famous thing.
Yep.
They've always taken out the fast food restaurant or something. I mean, to me, that's always, it seems maybe kind of a tragic artifact of the way that we live. But like the thing that's always so shocking to me whenever I've gone back anywhere is just that like a store is a different store now.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something that signifier really hammers home how, I don't know, this place was still living while I wasn't there. Even if they put in like a protected bus lane or something. I mean, God forbid.
In Los Angeles, that's...
But I've gone home, I grew up in LA and then moved to DC and then I returned to LA for college. So I did that. And then I went back to DC a couple of times for summers and stuff.
And you were in Northern California for a brief stint as well.
Yes, I was in Northern California for a brief mental collapse after college. And then I came back down here once more. That one, I was only gone for like 9 months or something. So it was pretty much the same, I think. But you lived in a different place, so that was weird. I came back down and you were in a different apartment.
That's true, yeah. I was not home again.
What? What about you? I mean, have you... Because you moved back up to San Francisco, but you weren't really from San Francisco. You haven't returned to...
I mean, I've lived
Menlo Park specifically to like live and work as an adult, no?
No, I have done that. I think it's, all the same stuff that people talk about. I think your comment about stores is correct. When I went back to Menlo Park, I was different. I don't think the spirit of the place had gotten bad in a different way, because instead of being sort of like fancy professionals, now it was tech hell. That was the big difference. So
right.
When I was there, it wasn't Facebook town. Facebook was like a high school thing for me. So
right. So it had gone from maybe like the sort of Peter Gallagher yuppie type.
Yep, exactly.
Living there to like Jack from Twitter with his weird stuff that looks like the costume designer of Dune threw it out.
That's right. So
I guess he's Jack from Blue Sky now.
Yeah, he is. Yeah, I would say I was just differently alienated. So that's not like a huge experience, I think, emotionally.
Yeah, it's always baffling to me because Soderbergh seems to have affection for Baton Rouge.
Oh, big time.
I guess I have affection for Los Angeles.
I hope so. You live there.
Yeah, I do live here, and I think I do have affection for it. But it's oddly, it's not really the part of, because like when I was a kid, I lived in La Cañada, which is a suburban. It's like very suburban and kind of out of the way, and I don't live there and I don't go there. So I've returned almost to like the thing that makes me feel, one of the things that makes me feel like I have returned, like since I came back from DC specifically, is things I saw from the freeway as a child.
Sure. Yeah.
So like those big murals of the LA Chamber Orchestra on the side of the 110.
But of course, you're in the driver's seat now.
Yep. I am in the driver's seat. It's me now. I'm daddy.
Yeah.
Beep, beep.
Thanks. She's sort of contributing now.
Yeah.
Yes, anding. Thank you for the question.
Sure.
I have a question for you. I have a question for you that's, this is, sometimes we just take a question that's been asked in the film. That's part of,
yeah.
It's one of the things we do. Ian, when did you finally see a penis? No, come on.
Well, could I tell a penis story?
Oh, yeah, you're welcome
all right,
to.
just a very fast one. I guess this is
I suspect a lot of them are. Because the guy...
This guy comes too fast.
Yes. Sometimes it's funny to explain a joke, Kimmy. You're right.
Yeah, it is. Sometime.
I was at Christian summer camp, and this was actually one of the non-traumatizing ways that you can see a penis at summer camp. No, this was just an experience of seeing like the 16-year-old or whatever who was in charge of a different group peeing next to me at the like YMCA pool we went to, and just really feeling like, oh, like we're not the same. There's like stages of life that that I haven't achieved yet and may never achieve.
This guy's like a Charmeleon.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Damn.
Yeah. All right. What was your real question, though? Sorry.
I mean, the story I was thinking of was also a side-by-side peeing story. So I think that's probably, for all penis havers out there, I suspect that we've all had some. This, in my case, this was just a friend his parents were European. And so if you can imagine, his looks different in a significant way.
He was too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's pretty funny, man.
No, I understand what you mean. Yeah, I don't think I saw an uncircumcised penis until I was an adult.
Practically A5 skin.
Sometimes, like if it's,
yeah,
extra.
like the forehead joke. Yep.
Mm-hmm. I like the forehead joke. Yeah, thanks, Kimmy. No, my real question is, are you in the habit of noticing wedding rings?
Okay.
In my experience, this is something that anecdotally, women in my life always seem to have picked up on, and I don't notice a wedding ring unless I have a specific question about someone. Like if I'm interested to find out if they're married for some reason or if they're wearing a wedding ring, but like I don't always glom onto it. Do you pick up on this?
So Jake is referencing near the beginning of the film, the sort of villain is talking about the attraction of his wedding ring and the effect that it has on other people. I would say that is something I started doing maybe like at the end of college, right after college, when I think it starts to become relevant. I think probably around the time that I started going to friends' weddings is when you realize, people my age can be married. And I need to be thinking about the people that I interact with. But I agree with you. It's not largely something I've focused on.
Monica and Chandler.
Yep. Friends' wedding.
I guess she did say she knows everything.
She does. Yeah. It seems like that type of connection making would be boring for you, maybe, but maybe not. I don't know.
You would think maybe that would get old for somebody, but it might also just be basically all that they have. So.
Right. I sort of, I can conceive of this.
I'm not going to ask you this question.
Okay.
But I'll just tell you a story. I'll tell you my answer to it, which is that, around, I think maybe before I was aware that the separation was imminent, I was at one of these diners, like a Coco's or something in La Cañada, and my dad was doing the spinny thing with his wedding ring, which he probably got from this movie. My dad is a dark-haired lawyer.
That's true. Very interesting. Very interesting. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that is maybe a bigger question. As a child, what are you thinking about your parents' wedding rings? That's probably the main wedding ring that I ever noticed was my parents' wedding rings.
You ever throw it in the fireplace and then it's cool to the touch?
Yeah. Put it in a little envelope. Yeah.
Is it secret? Is it safe? Mm-hmm. This is going to be the new, I think The Lord of the Rings is going to be the running digression, the main franchise digression on this Soderbergh series. I've started rereading the books. So we used to talk about The Flash and then Dune.
Next week we're talking about Ian Holm. So I feel like we're just lined up for this,
Yep.
I guess in 2 weeks.
You can't go home again.
Yeah.
Sounds like something Kimmy might have thrown in.
Yeah, it does. They did. All right.
Okay.
Shall we get into our film?
Let's talk about the film. The movie is Sex, Lies, and Videotape, released August 18th, 1989. Film was written and directed by a little baby boy named Steven Soderbergh. He's like 25, 26, makes you so mad. You want to freaking hit the guy. Mm-hmm. Edited it too. Goddamn,
Yeah.
And we talked about it a little bit last week on our intro episode, but this movie played initially, it played at the U.S. Film Festival, which was a few years later renamed to the Sundance Film Festival.
Well, I mean, it didn't just play a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be citing comes from our friend Steve himself, because he wrote a dang book about the production based on his diaries, based on his notes. It's a terrific read, I think. If you're invested in Steven Soderbergh, you should go check it out right away.
He's the person from whom I learned about the book The Jaws Log, which was written by Carl Gottlieb, the writer of the film Jaws, and also it's sort of a chronicle of the making of that film. Although there, Gottlieb is sort of he's not a fly on the wall because he's obviously involved, but he's not Steven Spielberg,
right?
And so he's kind of just noting, and he's Gottlieb was he was an improviser and comedian. I believe he was in that group with Larry Hankin from Escape from Alcatraz.
Mm-hmm.
So Gottlieb is, he's by nature kind of an observer at arm's reach, and Soderbergh it's fine to diary, I guess. And the movie was a big enough sensation that people would be interested in this, but there is an element of self-mythologizing in keeping this diary.
There is, but I mean, the interesting thing is the diary begins long before Sex, Lies, and Videotape is like a thing. He's working on other projects. He has this idea, and he's sort of talking about, well, I'm supposed to be working on this thing called Revolver, but I'm more interested in this idea that I've just come up with. So I think if this were all after the fact that he went back and tried to log everything, that would feel a lot more like self-mythologizing. I mean,
the guy's earned it at this point. Yeah,
certainly. But it's also, initially, it's just a kid who's made a bunch of short films, like noting what he's going through. And I don't know, it's impossible not to feel like you relate to a 25-year-old who is going into early pre-production on his first movie, and some people bring him a birthday cake and he says, like, I was really happy that they brought me this. I don't really know how to express that. I think maybe they thought it didn't mean anything to me, but it meant a lot to me.
Right.
And I'm 25. I need to figure this out. Right. I'm an adult now. And it's, that's an everyman experience that he's talking
Absolutely.
about.
I mean, it's interesting also to see, because he includes like scene ideas that he sketched out and then decides like, this isn't what the character should be like.
Yeah, exactly. Some of them are really bad. Some of them are, like we can just imagine a different movie. Gerard becomes Graham.
Exactly. I was going to say, how different would this movie be if the James Spader character's name was Gerard?
Pretty different. It's a bad choice. I'm really glad he changed it.
He then leaves in the scene where she says Graham is an unusual name. And like, not to me.
I gotta tell you, man, I'm gonna just spoil right now. I love this film.
I know this about you. Yeah.
That scene is one of the scenes that, like, every time I watch it feels a little weird to me because, maybe it's just not growing up in Baton Rouge where a guy named Graham is like a cosmopolitan weirdo. It's a, incredibly normal name. But anyway, you were talking about it premiering at the US Film Festival, and this is like a favor that somebody says you should put this in, and he said that the film is not even close to ready. This is like an early work print with temporary sound, and
the
Xerox
sound is quite
titled.
bad. Yeah.
And he says like, well, we'll just give it a shot. It's probably not going to do anything. And then what happens?
And then it plays like gangbusters. It wins an audience award. It's immediately a sensation.
Yep.
And this guy is like the hot guy. And this is the first time that the US Film Festival really has minted a new star the way that every year now. And now it's like, it's become like the Oscars, I feel like, where there are movies that are sort of made for Sundance that don't have any real larger purpose.
Definitely.
And there are plenty of like The Danish Girls and what's another fucking piece of shit like this, of Sundance that you find out Netflix paid $18 million for it, and then you like never hear about it again. Not just because it's Netflix. Sometimes
no. I mean, it's Duplass Brothers stuff. This is there's a lot of.
I'm thinking of the Jillian Bell marathon movie.
Okay. Yeah.
What was that called?
I don't remember. I know what you mean.
And then there's also obviously like the Nate Parker Birth of a Nation thing but like none of that in a lot of the accounts of this moment, people will talk about how like Hollywood types weren't going out to Park City yet.
No, I mean, he's excited that Paul Mazursky is in the audience for one of these things. And he's sort of like, oh, this is so crazy to me. Obviously, this is the same guy who early in his book, his friend sees Helena Bonham Carter at the movie theater. She's been in like 2 movies, and this is like the best thing that's ever happened to him. So he's, this is a huge deal for him. And like you're saying, by the time he leaves Sundance, there's like 5 screenings or something. They're all sold out. People are sitting in the aisles by the end of it because they've heard so much about this. And suddenly he thinks, okay, maybe I'm a filmmaker.
Well, so Let me tell you about my history with this film, and we'll talk
Great.
about your history with this film. So the first time I ever heard about this film, I'm looking through the baby book, my sister's baby book that I found.
Okay.
Because this movie was, there's like, questions in the baby book to talk about the moment where the child is born. And it was like, what's the number one TV show? What's the number one song? What's the number one movie? And I'm like 8 and I see Sex, Lies, and Videotape. My parents are freaking porno addicts.
Right. Yeah.
What the hell? Am I in trouble for looking at the book?
The questions of an 8-year-old, sure.
That's one of my favorite lines in the movie is when Andy McDowell says, "You're in trouble."
It's really good. Yeah.
That's great. And so I was, I had heard about it. And then for a while, I would have pointed to this as like, The Simpsons would always make fun of Tree of Wooden Clogs. That'd be like the go-to boring movie. This to me just sounded like the most grown-up dinner party ass movie.
Interesting.
And so I didn't watch it for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And then I finally watched it for the very first time. I became, I like Soderbergh quite a bit. But for some reason, I just never got around to it. And I finally watched it for the first time when we were, I believe, prepping for the autofocus episode.
We talked about it then. Yeah.
Because of, some thematic resonances.
For sure.
And I was a little underwhelmed because the movie has been talked about in such titanic terms. And you hear about people sitting in the aisles at Sundance.
Right.
And it doesn't immediately make you think like a very well observed film about 4 people having different conversations.
No, I mean, in fairness, that's what Soderbergh also said. He was like, my docudrama is not going to be changing the world. He didn't expect this to be something that people cared about.
Well, then afterward, he said sometimes he spoke a little bit disparagingly of the movie and said people went nuts for it just because they were starved for anything like this. Like he'll shit on his own movie. I mean, in fairness, I've seen Rain Man. It's awful. Right. So like,
you can imagine if that's what you've been watching recently.
Cocktail better. The better Tom Cruise movie of 1988. That's my hot take.
Objectively.
Cocktail's not good either, but it's like fun.
Yeah.
It's got Kokomo in it. So, and then I rewatched it in preparation for this, and I liked it quite a bit more because I knew what to expect and was able to just. It's a movie of details. It's a movie of fine details.
Absolutely.
And I by far when we have talked about doing this, friends have reached out with like, hey, I want to do Sex, Lies, and Videotape. I love Sex, Lies, and Videotape. And so people love this movie, and you're one of them. But when did you first watch this? Did you have a gun in your hand?
Was
it one of those?
Pretty close, yes. This is right. Jake's referencing, this was a freshman year college watch. I feel like this is like prime time. This is when I was logging every single thing I watched. That's right. I was in the sunken place. This is when I was watching like 2-3 movies a day, episodes of TV while doing stuff on my phone to make sure that I couldn't have any internally generated ideas, basically.
God, no.
Yeah. So for me, this was, thinking about it, an 18-year-old with new depression watching this movie, you can see why maybe it would rock their world. And, I already loved...
Probably would have hit hard for me then, too.
Yeah. I already loved so much of Soderbergh's work. I think probably I watched Out of Sight for the same time, either right before or after that.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, this is the type of film, it goes into the My Dinner with Andre category, not just because it's adults talking to each other, but because my relationship with the characters has evolved as I've aged. The degree to which I admire different people in the movie has evolved. I think probably the first time I watched the movie, I can't say this for sure, but I would bet that I spent most of the movie saying, Graham, what a cool guy, until...
Yeah, I gotta get some black shirts.
Exactly, until the end of the movie, and then sort of, feeling ashamed that I was also admiring this person who's doing not so great stuff to other people.
Yeah. It would have... I do shudder to think how my behavior might have been improved by seeing this at that time. I've never understood that title. It seems like such a kind of it doesn't need to be. Aren't most dinners with entree?
Yeah. Unless you're in Spain, perhaps, or
yeah, topless.
I thought you were going to talk about the title of this movie, which
yes,
I don't love, but is a much better title than some of the other stuff.
It is a sort of an any port in a storm type of situation. So, well, let's kind of finish the pre-explosion life of this movie.
Okay. Yeah. So this starts as like an idea that Soderbergh says, I'm going to make this thing for $60,000. I'm going to shoot it on the weekends on 16 millimeter, and I'm going to use my buddies again. But it's still going to be the biggest thing he shot. He's only made short films and then the Yes concert film that we talked about at this point.
Yeah. A lot of people say yes in this movie, I noticed. There's not a lot of yeah or yep. It is yes. I don't think that's anything he would have thought about at all, but kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we talked about it last week, but Soderbergh he spent a lot of his youth in Baton Rouge. His dad was the dean of education at LSU. A lot of his LSU buddies work on this movie, but he had made a number of attempts he'd gone to LA a few times to try to get a job, and he had gotten some, and then things would momentum would peter out, and he would return to Baton Rouge. Yeah,
so right now he's sleeping on his friend Larry Blake's like cottage couch, his married friends.
Okay, so he's in Graham mode.
Mm-hmm.
He's
in Graham mode, exactly.
He has talked about, this is a sort of vulnerable thing I am going to share. At the suggestion of a therapist, because of, if you can imagine, listener, I have some kind of unusual, not maybe unusual, but I have some areas for improvement in the region of emotional attachment. Areas that could be strengthened.
What did you say your parents' relationship was like?
Divorced. So I attended a meeting of Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous because I thought maybe I have one of these love addictions. Maybe I have some kind of a addictive relationship to affection, and it's a 12-step group, so they're all kind of loosely anarchically affiliated, and this is just the one meeting that I went to, and the one group of people who showed up to the Zoom, this was like 2021 or something, the Zoom call that day. But it's a bunch of people in LA who are talking about how like the biggest problem in their life is that they cannot stop getting laid.
Yeah.
And these people are having a problem. Genuinely, this seems to be wreaking havoc on their emotional lives.
We're not 15 years old. We understand how this could make it feel like nothing in your life is working.
Right. But this is not the issue I'm here to solve, is that I simply cannot stop attracting a bunch of people to have sex with me.
Yep.
But so when I read about Soderbergh talking about how this movie was sort of born out of him having a problem cheating on his partner with like too many different women, it's a little bit of a, that sucks, man. That's too bad, huh?
Yeah.
That must be really hard for you. Also, like, I mean, he's like he's a nice enough looking guy, but he's not. No, it's not like
that's right. Yeah,
you hear about Brad Pitt or whatever.
Yes,
cheating.
Yeah, but you're right. It comes partly out of these experiences he's had in his previous relationships, his own sort of self-hatred about some of his behavior, and then I think you mentioned in our introduction episode that his questions about what's happening behind the doors of like suburban Louisiana, these marriages that he grew up, understanding these people, but what would actually be like to be in there with them, the deception, the alienation.
It's funny to think about, people like to talk about the idea of dreams in Inception and how this maybe speaks to like the mind type of Christopher Nolan.
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny to think about this as like possibly another response to the same initial germ that created Blue Velvet.
Yep.
Like what darkness lurks behind the white picket fence, but like in David Lynch's mind, it's real crazy.
Right. Abuse and like psychotic breaks. And for Soderbergh's
like a bad dinner party.
Yeah. They might not be understanding each other as much as they should.
So they cast the movie. There's a bunch of, it's like all movies that launched superstars. There's all these sliding doors accounts of who was almost in the movie. Tim Daly,
Kyle MacLachlan was almost our old friend Aidan Quinn from Stars Fall and Henrietta.
Not my old friend.
Not mine either.
Jennifer Jason Leigh wanted the role, I believe, of Cynthia, and then like turned it down because of something else and always regretted it.
Yeah. He wanted Elizabeth McGovern for the lead, but her agent wouldn't even give her the script because she thought it was pornographic.
There's a lot of that, which is funny because it's frank in its discussion, but there was distinctly no nudity in the film. Which
became an issue for him. I mean, some of the people who agreed to make the film agreed to make it because they thought there might be nudity as like a backup for drawing
like producers,
audiences.
You mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So
you're not like James Spader was like, I'm excited to be in a movie with nudity in it.
No, in fact, part of the reason he decided to cut it is Laura San Giacomo asked him, like, I don't really feel comfortable with the idea of being nude. Is it possible to have a no nudity clause? And he was saying, I don't know if I want to eliminate that option, but also I can't imagine asking somebody to be nude who's not comfortable doing it, and it probably won't help the film. So he ultimately agrees to that. But yeah, you're talking about him getting these actors. So he gets an initial deal with this company called Musafilm that, so they're the ones that jump the budget up, basically change everything. It's like now it's $500,000. Now
are they affiliated with RCA?
They're not. No. This is before. So he decided not to go with RCA initially because Musafilm says, let's do it.
Scared of dogs.
That's right. And because Musafilm says you can do black and white, which he really wants to do.
Oh, yeah, of course.
And so he's thinking, great. This is where he finds the actors. Andie MacDowell reaches out to him because she gets the script. Jimmy Spader reaches out to him because he gets the script. Yeah, they always call him
Jimmy Spader.
Yeah, and he thinks that neither of these people will be right for the role.
Red
Reddington.
Reddington.
That's right. Yeah. Yes. Red Reddington. Yeah. Yes, that's unfortunately true.
I'm on the blacklist.
I can believe that.
Makes sense.
Yeah,
actually, I've seen a few episodes of that show. It's actually pretty fun.
That's my parents like that show, and that's great.
Like if I was on an airplane,
yeah,
I would watch so much the Blacklist.
Yep.
Should call it the Red List.
They should have called it the Red List. Yeah.
So Jimmy Spader gets brought in,
and he sort of like he chastises himself. He's like, I couldn't believe that I didn't see these people's potential just because I hadn't seen them do this. People are capable of doing new stuff, and so he makes all these deals. And then Musafilm drops out because they can't stand the idea of black and white. And I think it's never going to work. They change their mind. So I love this. This is when he goes to Columbia and they sort of say like, well, you can do it with us if you drop this black and white thing. And he says, all right, fine, whatever. It's whatever. We'll do it.
Very funny to me.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, it's a classic story of a filmmaker wanting to do black and white. I think this was one of the reasons why Tarantino's adaptation of Casino Royale never ended up going, because he's like, I want to do a James Bond movie in black and white, which like they've never been. Yes. And then they end up doing black and white for the first 8 minutes. I
was just about to say, the film that famously introduces new grimy Bond with a bit of black and white. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. His name's James Bond.
Sorry, excuse me.
I just finished those. We were talking about that on the Patreon recently because of the move. I've been sort of stressed out, and so trying to watch something, unchallenging. Mm-hmm. So I watched the Craig Bonds again.
Yep.
And I finished. I watched No Time to Die for the first time.
His name's James Bond, by the way.
Yeah, that's good. Anyway, the shit looks like Uncharted. Shit looks like an Uncharted cutscene.
It does.
Dog dick. Yeah. If you haven't seen that movie, this is a spoiler. Skip ahead. Did people talk about James Bond dying in that movie? He kills himself.
Yeah.
Guy takes the freaking coward's way out. Like a regular 18-year-old Ian Ryan.
Don't say that even as a joke.
Okay. Well, you shouldn't kill yourself, though. We're on the record here.
We have gone on the record. Check out our Mishima episode if you
sort
want to think about it.
Spader style. You think that this problem is your own, but it actually affects other people.
It's true. So, that's one of the reasons.
And so James Bond calls a airstrike on himself.
Yeah.
But then his big mustached friend Sully gets away with the sunken treasure or whatever.
Mm-hmm. So that's frustrating.
Isn't that the guy from Uncharted? Isn't his name Sully?
I thought his name was Nathan Drake.
No, his friend though.
Oh, I don't remember. I don't remember people's friends' names. Come on.
It's like the other guy. Whatever.
Not my business.
A year before this, James Spader's in a movie called Jack's Back, which is a real Jeremy Allison favorite. That movie was recommended to me by a friend of the show, Jeremy Allison, to the artwork.
Great.
This is a movie where Spader, he's a young doctor in Los Angeles, lives in a gorgeous Echo Park apartment overlooking the lake, which the building is still there and looks like you shouldn't go in it now. And he comes under suspicion when someone starts committing murders inspired by the centennial of Jack the Ripper, which is interesting because they just identified him. Did you see that?
No, I didn't see that.
This is real. This is not a joke. They just they did some DNA matching, and one of the suspects at the time
just was Jack the Ripper.
Was Jack the Ripper.
Interesting.
Which kind of sucks. They shouldn't have revealed that. You know?
I mean, it's not like this is giving anybody closure, right? This is
exactly. And it was kind of cool. No, they did actually find a relative of, like, a descendant of one of the victims who's like an old English lady.
Oh.
Oh, it's so nice to know.
Yeah, I think I saw her in a Python sketch.
Got him Graham in there.
Yeah.
All right. Where were we?
Yeah. So
they make the movie.
Make the new deal. They're bringing in these actors. Spader's like the only one who has a real name at this point. I mean, Andy McDowell's been in stuff, but Laura San Giacomo's been like an extra in TV. And
Peter Gallagher had done a couple things. He was more famous than the rest of them.
Yeah, and he comes in as a replacement later because people drop out because this takes so long. But yeah, I mean, Soderbergh is assembling his crew, right? He tries to get Toyomichi Kurita, the DP from Alan Rudolph's The Moderns. Shout out to our friends over at Altmania.
Shout out to the Altmaniacs.
Yeah. And because he loves The Moderns, he loves Alan Rudolph, but he doesn't. But they recommend this guy Walt Lloyd to him, who's going to become the DP on this and a couple other things. He meets this nice dude named Cliff Martinez, and he says, like, you know what?
Do you know he was the drummer in the Red Hot Chili Peppers?
Yeah. An Alien Nation.
One of the worst bands there is.
Right. Yeah.
The most annoying music ever made.
I mean, and Soderbergh's observations about him are, I really liked what I heard. He seemed like a really nice guy. My gut says he would do a good job. And that's it. He's hired. He's on the movie.
And he did.
Yep.
And he would continue to do so.
Yes, exactly. So they're getting everybody together. They truly, like, they're bringing people on for all the production staff in mid-July for a August 1st, 1988 shoot. To talk about how quick this evolution is, the $60,000 shooting on the weekends plan was in January of 1988. So this is like within 6 months, this has become this whole new thing.
It's become like a real movie.
Yeah, exactly. But you know, it's also kind of not a real movie because it's Jimmy Spader's wife is doing set decoration because like that's going to make it easy. And
the budget for set decoration is often reported as like $5,000 or $6,000 for the whole movie.
Yep.
And which is, I mean, he makes it work beautifully because this just looks kind of like a real people's houses and offices.
He shot it at his friend's house, and you know that was the easiest way to save money, and it works. Yeah,
it was great.
So these people, and you mentioned he's bringing on his old friends. There's probably 6 people from his Louisiana days that he brings back. Some of them are going to have brief moments in the film. Some of them are he's sort of like, he just hires them and then says, I'm going to figure out what they're going to do. So like one of them becomes second AD because he says, well, she was doing a great job, so she gets to be second AD now. And, you know, he like the person who's doing the art department stuff is calling in favors to get costumes because she had already done a production in Baton Rouge before. So, you know, this is pretty close to a huge student film in some capacity.
Yeah.
But
wait, is the second unit director, is that Alexandra Root?
It is Alex, he calls her.
Who's also the girl on the tape.
Exactly.
She's the first,
Which they decide when Jennifer Jason Leigh says she was the one sent 8mm to do this thing, and then she says, I can't do it, it's too stressful.
Wait,
so
8mm didn't come out for like 10 years.
Yeah.
Did I tell you about my Jennifer Jason Leigh story?
I can't remember.
So we're recording this a few days after Valentine's Day.
Yep.
Spoiler.
Mm-hmm.
And this was maybe last year or the year before. I took my best gal to a sushi restaurant, a nice sushi restaurant here in town on February 13th.
Okay, great.
Because you can. That's a little life hack.
Yeah. Yes.
Easier to get
grind set guys. He loves this stuff.
Yeah. get ahead of it. And lovely restaurant. And there was a big party behind us. And Amanda was facing them and said, I think that might be Jennifer Jason Leigh. And I looked, I had to, do a quick scratch the ear, look around. Yep, Ian's doing it. And couldn't tell. And it was like, it was very possibly Jennifer Jason Leigh doing totally different makeup than she usually has in a movie, or maybe she had just had some work done or not had work done recently enough. Like it was a woman who looked a fair amount like Jennifer Jason Leigh, couldn't tell.
Yep.
And then they start singing happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Jennifer.
Happy birthday dear Jennifer Jason.
Yeah. Sorry about Twilight Zone, the movie,
Yeah.
Miami Blues. I think that's what she does instead of this movie. Anyway, that's my Jennifer Jason Leigh story. So she was almost in the film.
How was the food?
Great. Couldn't tell you what the place was called. I think it was affiliated with, this is a maybe just an LA thing, I'm not sure, but there's like a real fancy, expensive, like 11-seat sushi place somewhere in town that then opened a more casual izakaya style place with more tables where you can actually get a reservation and it won't cost you your whole life savings. So I think it was one of those. Don't try to find me. Don't try to find me in Los Angeles. So then they shoot the movie. They make the movie.
Yep. They make the movie. I mean, they're figuring it out. We'll talk about it when we're talking about the movie, but a lot of the stuff, he's like doing rewrites on set.
Yeah.
The actors are helping. Everybody
McDowell
on the production is helping. Working
the rollout in acting class.
Yeah.
And like coming in with a bunch of ideas and stuff she figured out in acting class.
Yep.
They didn't have enough cable to get the generator far enough from the set that it wouldn't make noise. And so there's an entire special feature on the Criterion Blu-ray of this with Larry Blake talking about how hard it was for them to eliminate the very loud generator noise in every scene.
Yeah.
And so they've done several sound mixes, sound passes. Like he'll play, here's the Park City mix, and it sounds like shit. And there's like a little like noise in the background. They call it the Jenny because they're crew guys.
Yeah.
And then there's the mix for the wide release, which sounds fine. And then they remixed it for the 2018 Criterion release. And at the end of this feature, he passes on a message from Steven Soderbergh who says, please destroy any previous copies you have of this film.
Yeah, I mean, throughout this process, I will say it's not the type of thing that we can go into too much, but he is so focused on the technical aspect. And later, in the heady days of his new popularity, he talks to Wim Wenders and they have a discussion about the fact that to them, the most important stuff is like story and character, but the stuff that they spend all this time thinking about is the technical aspect. So the stock he's shooting on, the sound tape he's going to use, he's like doing stuff that nobody's done before. And at the same time, Spader says to him, like, you're shooting like an editor, which makes him really happy that, he's like thinking about this stuff ahead of time. It feels like somebody who knows the whole process. He's becoming himself in the course of shooting this movie, which is something that happens to all of us. Yeah,
sounds cool. And then the movie, of course, plays the Cannes Film Festival.
Yes.
Sort of by accident, like they kind of something drops out and they get in under the wire or something like that.
Exactly.
Some impossible story.
Yeah.
And then wins the Palme d'Or. Wim Wenders, as you mentioned, is the jury president. Hector Babenco, our pal who directed Kiss of the Spider Woman,
That's right.
on the jury. And Soderbergh is the youngest person to win a Palme d'Or solo. I think there might have been somebody younger as like part of a directing team or something.
Louis Malle with Jacques Cousteau.
There you go. And was it the Silent World?
I think so.
That's a very cool movie in which you watch a bunch of French oceanographer guys beat like dozens of sharks to death for no reason.
Yeah, it's really upsetting. Yeah.
I don't recommend doing that.
Nope.
Don't do that. Don't beat any sharks. But yeah, he wins the Palme and it's a sensation and Miramax picks it up.
I mean, he wins the Palme above his new friend Spike Lee, who he meets in Cannes, and they have like a nice little talk. I guess Spike likes his movie. And he says he makes references to Spike Lee's like outsized reputation in newspapers and says like he was a totally cool guy. I thought maybe he would make fun of my movie for being about like rich white people talking in rooms or something. But no, it seemed like he appreciated it. But it is crazy.
I mean, if you've seen She's Gotta Have It, it seems like the kind of thing Spike would appreciate. That's a movie about people talking about sexuality as well.
I totally agree. But Spike Lee does get upset about this outcome, not because seemingly he doesn't like sexualized in Videotape, but just he thinks that there's like preference for the types of stories that, you know, Soderbergh is telling above Do the Right Thing, which obviously also an all-time movie.
Well, he's not the only person to make that observation. I think Amy Taubin points this out as well in Film Comment. But Soderbergh, in a number of the kind of archival interview things on the Blu-ray, is wearing, at one point he's wearing a Do the Right Thing t-shirt. In another, he's wearing a 40 Acres and a Mule Productions like Letterman jacket. That's very cool.
Exactly. And he's a big fan of the Do the Right Thing trailer. I mean, he's like a film nerd.
He's a dork.
Speaking of Wim Wenders, in pre-production, he goes to see Wings of Desire and says like, this is one of the greatest films. I'm so happy this didn't get made in the US. He also goes to see your old friend, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, and says, this is mind blowing. This is like the future of cinema. I'm so excited this got made. So, I mean, he's just like a guy enjoying movies all the time, and including Spike Lee stuff.
And he bumps into a guy while he's coming out of Wings of Desire. He bumps into a couple on the street. He says, I'm so sorry. What are your names? And one of them says, oh, I'm Johnny. And then the other one says, my name's Iris.
Yeah.
And they'll go on to, he'll go on to write a song about her. So let's talk about the plot of the film.
Let's talk about the plot of the film. Yeah.
So it's about 4 people.
It's about 4 people.
There's a married couple, John and Anne. It's been pointed out before. It's not that interesting. The guy's name is John Mulaney, which is the name of another guy.
Yeah.
Okay. John and Anne Mulaney. John is a yuppie lawyer. He's very successful, wears suspenders. He looks like he's trying to look like Gordon Gekko. Peter Gallagher in the special features talks about when they went to buy the suits and he was worried about the budget of the movie, and Soderbergh's like, no, have fun, get some stuff, you know?
Yeah. And then he bought the suits after the production was over. He liked them. So
yeah, they look good on him.
Yep.
I mean, they make him look like a jackass, but maybe it's because he's acting like one.
Yeah. Yep.
And then Anne is his uptight, Southern wife. Not uptight is dismissive. His obviously at odds with herself, like a woman who's clearly uncomfortable with her sexuality, with her personhood, a woman who's like clearly, as the Spader character points out, like extraordinarily self-conscious and can't stop thinking about being seen, being perceived. She's a housewife because her husband has specifically asked her to stop working.
Mm-hmm. A lot of this is revealed through therapy, where she's also sort of laughing at the idea of masturbation, sort of saying that it's sort of humiliating and ridiculous, and what if your dead grandpa sees you, and blushing at the thought.
Nice to watch a movie where someone's worried about what we're going to do with all the garbage from the perspective now of having figured that out and solved that problem.
All right. Well, I want to talk about that later, so I'm not going to comment on it now. But.
Okay. But the movie opens on her in therapy, where we just learned that this is a person who is, she's not at peace with herself. She has a sister.
Mm-hmm.
She has a freewheeling sort of, look how bohemian I am, performatively liberated sister named Cynthia, played by Laura San Giacomo, who is going to be a frequent collaborator of Steven Soderbergh's. Interestingly, did you know that Andie MacDowell's first role in Greystoke, The Legend of Tarzan, The Legend of Greystoke, The King of the Apes, whatever that movie's called, it's got too many words in it. Yeah. Her whole performance is overdubbed by Glenn Close.
Whoa, I did not know that. Okay.
Yeah.
Laura San Giacomo, the queen of overdubbing.
Right, exactly. Specifically in Soderbergh films. And also the entire John performance was overdubbed as well, because on the set when he talked, this is what he sounded like.
Sure. I can see why that would be a problem for them.
The joke is Peter Gallagher.
Yeah. Yep.
Oh, she's explaining the jokes again.
Yeah. Well, that's.
I guess that
good,
might be helpful.
the audience. I think I wonder sometimes what percentage of this makes sense to them.
Maybe we should have her. Yeah, should have her just dissect the riff.
She could do an audio commentary on the podcast.
The riff dissection. Yeah, that'd be cool. So Cynthia is having an affair with John. Well, really, John's having an affair with Cynthia, but Cynthia's these sisters reminded me very much of me and my sister, but as children, where like she wanted spiral macaroni and cheese, and so I hated spiral macaroni and cheese. You know?
Yes. This is part of what we discover in the course of the film is that it might seem like the issues are about sex, and sometimes they are, but sometimes our feelings about sex, our feelings about other people are really about things that we haven't recognized yet. So like Cynthia is sleeping with her sister's husband, and maybe it's not really about wanting to sleep with him necessarily.
Right. It's versus her. Who versus,
you
know?
Yep.
And then the story kicks off when John's old college buddy, who he hasn't seen in 9 years, is coming to town, and he's offered him a place to stay while he gets himself situated in Baton Rouge. I think the implication is that they went to LSU. Do they talk about LSU explicitly?
I don't know if they say it. Yeah, I don't know if that's... Yeah.
But this is Graham, played by Jimmy Spader, who is... I mean, he's a very specific kind of guy, but I don't even know how to identify this guy, because he's not an artist. That's the thing that's the most interesting about him, is that he's not American Beauty filming the plastic bag, which is obviously a riff on this movie. We find that he has all these tapes that he's made of women who he's interviewing about their sexual history, but he calls it a personal project. He seems to stick to this rule that he's not going to show them to anyone else.
I mean, it's related to his, in part, sexual gratification. This is because we find out later in the film that he's impotent, and now the only way that he can achieve sexual pleasure is not in the room with somebody, but only watching people that he does have some type of personal relationship with. He's had contact with before. But he's not an artist, but he acts. I mean, I think they use the word artist to describe him at different points.
Calls him Artie. Yeah, and calls him Artie.
Yeah, but he is like leaving a lot of space to listen to what people are saying.
James Spacer.
James Spacer. And he is asking really blunt questions about, like, what do you feel about marriage to this person that he met 30 seconds ago?
How do you like being married?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then her answers are all about the financial security of it.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, he is obviously outside of, like Cynthia, he's like, Cynthia seems to be consciously rejecting the Reagan consensus, upwardly mobile white family model, and Graham is rejecting it maybe in his own way. He's not like opposed to it in a way that makes total logical sense. It's sort of like he's recoiling from it and can't figure out exactly how he's going to live in opposition to it, which comes to a head in the climax.
Definitely.
But he's like a hot guy on the spectrum.
Yeah.
I guess.
Just a little bit,
basically. Yeah. But he and Anne immediately are fascinated by one another. They have extraordinary chemistry.
They really do.
But it's interesting that because Andie MacDowell, her story is as a person, as a performer, is like one of not being taken seriously because she's like a pretty woman who was a model, and because she has a Southern accent, and so no one takes her seriously, and no one thinks she can act. I
mean, including Soderbergh's producers and stuff, where after he does the first casting session with her and says, like, this is Anne, that she was incredible, she brought her own stuff, she did an amazing job, one of his producer friends, he says, Stephen must have fallen in love with this model, basically. Right. That's what's happened.
And she, there's even like in the first scene where Anne and Graham are having lunch at the restaurant, and she's fondling the wine glass, like doing the famous body language thing of something people do when they're attracted to someone.
Yeah.
But also nervous. And Soderbergh talks about thinking, oh man, this is great. She doesn't know that she's doing this. This is terrific that we're capturing this. And then afterwards, she reveals that she had that's one of the things she worked out in acting class. It's like, I'm going to play with the wine glass during the scene. So even he, who has defended her, I remember reading somewhere him saying that he always liked her because she sounded like people he grew up with. This is, to him, this is a normal way people can talk. Even he underestimated her.
Yeah, I mean, he's shocked. She can blush on command. So one of the first scenes they shoot is that therapy scene where she's talking about masturbation, and he's blown away that she can just control her emotions enough to make it seem like she's embarrassed about this thing she doesn't care about at all. Later in the shoot, the thing where they're drinking iced tea and she spills it while she gets scandalized.
That was an accident.
But
she says.
He was like, that was the best thing that happened. And she was just doing it. She was just you know.
She is quick to point out in the special features that she personally, in her own life, doesn't have any trouble having an orgasm. Right. Just to be clear.
It's the coolest thing you can
she's
say
so cool.
on an audio commentary. Yeah. All right. But you're right. So they have this, they start to bond with each other. And what do they discover? What is this process?
In this process, they discover that she isn't really comfortable with sex, and he is impotent because he isn't really comfortable with sex in a different sort of way.
Yep.
And that neither of them, they both seem to have a kind of issue or they're confused about intimacy. They have different concepts of intimacy as well.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a little bit of a men are from Mars, women are from Venus thing going on, but I think the film kind of rejects that ultimately because of the other pairing.
Yeah, but initially Anne says that stuff about women wanting it just as much as men is crap, and Spader says, yeah, maybe it's that famous thing about men are attracted and then learn to love, and women love and then become attracted, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of different kinds of people and different people who identify as men or women or neither or both. So it's sort of a silly thing to make a sweeping generalization, but I do think that people who are socialized to be one or the other tends to come with a lot of this baggage about how you're supposed to use your sexuality and men are encouraged to be comfortable with it in a very different way than women are encouraged to be uncomfortable with it.
Yeah, and I mean, you're exactly right. A huge part of this film, I think, is saying we are socialized to feel certain things, and also we're having individual responses to things based on our unique backgrounds, personalities, whatever. So how do we create these common terms when both those things are the case? There are shared forces and there's absolute individual experience.
I've just had a real Jimmy Neutron brain blast.
Okay.
And I was just realizing that this movie would make an incredible double feature with one of our favorite films, one of my favorite films in particular. We've talked about on a different podcast. Austin Powers, International Man of Mystery. This is a movie about the wave of the sexual revolution has crested. Now what? Now how do we integrate this into society?
Yeah.
And I mean, Andy McDowell would have been great in an Austin Powers movie.
Would have been
AP4.
Terrific. Yeah, it's true.
I talk about it all the time.
Yep.
Because he could do kind of a live and let die thing. Austin Powers on a fan boat or something.
That would be terrific. Yeah, Gator.
Cool. Running across the gators.
Yeah. Come on.
I like that. Maybe he goes to Disney World. They'd never let him.
They wouldn't let
have
him
to steal the shots like the Florida Project.
Yeah.
So meanwhile, while all this is happening, Cynthia and John are fucking. This is a term that Anne is very uncomfortable using, and Cynthia is sort of performatively coarse. She is an artist, but we don't really see much of her process, and it seems like it's more of a lifestyle than it is a real calling, maybe.
Yeah, her job is she's a bartender. She works at a bar.
Yeah. Do you know who that guy is at the bar?
I do, yes. He's
Steve Brill.
Yeah, a buddy from Outlaw, the production company that Steven Soderbergh partly made this with. He was just had his own project. He was another writer. He was hanging out on the couch doing rewrites, and Steve Soderbergh said, all right, he's cool. Let's bring him in.
But do you know what he went on to do?
I don't know if I do. I know that in this film, he like improvised all his lines, and Steven Soderbergh thought he did an incredible job. But what did he?
He's very funny.
Yeah. Yes.
So this guy goes on to write Mighty Ducks.
Okay.
And
great.
Heavyweights.
Wow.
And then co-write and direct like half of the biggest Adam Sandler movies. Like he directed Little Nicky and Mr. Deeds.
I did not know this.
Sandy Wexler. Yeah, he's still like a Happy Madison
Hubie Halloween.
go-to.
Yeah.
Hubie Halloween. He also created the Mighty Ducks Disney Plus show. So first of all,
the name
Steve
did
Brill
sound familiar. Okay, Steve Brill
has a nice house. Speaking of houses, by the way, I failed to tell you about this. So in the process of moving, there's big stacks of boxes everywhere, and the cats are enjoying the new jungle gym.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
I stacked some boxes a little too high, too close to a shelf, and so they got to the stuff that I had put on top of the shelf to keep it away from them.
Yep.
And I learned this because I came back into this very room where I'm sitting, and on top of a stack of boxes that had been, the top of it had just been a top of a cardboard box. Now, top of a cardboard box with Lego Jake Sully.
Oh,
they had found
wow. Was
Lego
he
Jake
unharmed?
Sully. Yeah. And
great.
Weirdly, this is not the first time that I have found Lego Jake Sully in an odd place, and that's why he was on top of the shelf.
I see.
They love him.
Animal power. Yeah, of course. I mean,
maybe they like blue.
Yep, maybe.
Yeah. Anyway, so they're fucking. He's like Speaking of sex and love addicts, this guy is destroying his career.
Yep.
By continually blowing off a big client because he can't resist the opportunity to have sex with his wife's sister, which, first of all, seems like it happens all the time. Like, I don't know. It's not like this is a one-time thing. You should meet with Mr. Kirkland.
You should just go ahead and find time. Yeah. But I think it's part of it. These different people's relationships to sex. He seems...
Parents have a Costco membership?
Oh, yeah,
Speaking
of course.
Kirkland?
We're big
I just
Costco
wondered
members.
if because you got a lot of brothers.
Yeah.
Seems like the way to do it. I was wondering if that was maybe like a little too plebeian for the Menlo Park crowd.
Yeah, my family, I will say, our lives changed significantly, like when I was in 3rd grade and my dad was...
Till we found all these Roman coins in the yard.
Yes, basically, yeah.
You know how they're always doing that over there?
Yeah, they love finding Roman coins.
That'd be cool as hell. I would love to find some antiquities.
Oh, yeah.
This belongs in a museum. Come here, short round. It's me, Indiana Jones.
Oh, no. This lady likes short round.
I hit my throat on the side of a temple.
Yeah.
And then I hit my head. You ever seen that? I saw a video. Sorry, this is Digression City. I saw a video on Instagram of a lady who had a brain trauma and then woke up with a Chinese accent.
Oh,
which,
man.
Not only is this a white lady talking weird, but also everyone who said she has a Chinese accent,
is
you are
racist.
in big trouble. She doesn't sound like that. She sounds like she hit her head.
Whoa, man. Yeah. She just had something happen to her speech processing.
Yeah. So now I'm learning what you think Chinese people sound like.
Yep.
Anyway.
All right.
Yeah.
So
back to it.
Yeah. This guy's a lawyer, but he's fucking up his whole life. He doesn't know how to be happy. He doesn't know what he cares about.
He's a prick. I mean, the lawyer thing, there's lots of jokes in the film about, there's a sort of recurring line. Liars are the Graham thinks liars are the worst type of person, and the second worst type of person is a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the lawyer is it functions in a number of ways. First, it's like the first thing Gallagher talks about in this special feature is about Reagan. Like, to him, this movie is entirely about Reagan, and like specifically like people coming of age in the Reagan era. He symbolizes the yuppie, but he's also symbolizing to me this like very particular cold or conception of trust or like emotional safety, because his concern once the movie kicks off is like he at one point asks, I believe he asked Cynthia if she signed a contract.
Yes. Yeah, I want to talk about that scene later. So, yeah. So what happened? I mean, we already kind of spoiled the reveal about Graham. The thing up until this point in the film, he just kind of been an odd dude. And then now that Anne has this really close relationship to him, she drops by his new apartment and discovers what? What is the deal?
Famous podcast girlfriend has something to say?
It's obviously Ghost. Talk about that. And they all look really great in the special features, but Peter Gallagher looks so fucking hot in the special features. Crazy.
Can you hear that? Yeah. Famous podcast girlfriend said that this is gauche to say, but everyone looks hot in the special features, but modern day, or like 2018 Peter Gallagher looks extremely
current
hot.
Peter Gallagher. Oh,
yeah, he's like
interesting.
very salt and pepper.
Interesting.
Like his hair, he has like David Lynch.
He has like David Lynch hair. He looks the same too. Like facially, he looks. I don't know what his.
It's crazy.
Got good genes, and maybe he's doing cold packs or something.
Yeah,
but he
maybe.
looks-
I mean, I didn't think of like OC era Peter Gallagher as being particularly handsome, but I think Sex Lives and Videotape, and now it sounds like aged Peter Gallagher.
He
Hotties.
didn't think he didn't think OC era Peter Gallagher is hot. That's just that you were maybe homophobic as a teenager.
Yeah,
I
I
think.
think that you were maybe missing.
That might be true.
He's hot because he's got such good vibes. First
Yeah,
off, he's
Sandy
dad.
Cohen.
Sandy
he's
Cohen,
He'll
yeah.
take care of you.
It's
a
true.
public.
Make sure
He's
you're
a public
okay.
defender.
He's a cool
Come
dad.
first.
Yeah.
He's a
Yeah.
cool dad. He
He's
says.
a cool dad.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, he's like a handsome dad.
He is. No, he definitely
Yeah.
is.
I mean,
He is.
he's kind
He
of
is.
styled down because he's a public defender. So
Right.
he's not supposed to be like slick.
And he's
No.
a Jew.
And he's Jew.
And,
I was really disappointed to find out that Peter Gallagher is not Jewish.
Well, I mean, his name's Peter Gallagher.
I know, but he reads Jewish, okay?
You know, his daughter's name is
Catherine.
Catherine Gallagher,
Wow.
like Mary Catherine
Yeah.
Gallagher, like superstar.
That's
Holly
really
Shannon.
weird. Yeah.
She's not Jewish either. She's Irish.
No.
Anyway,
She seems
he looks
cool.
crazy hot in 2018.
I love to hear it.
That's all.
Yeah, he does.
All right. So we're saying, what's the situation here? Like, what upsets everybody?
Graham's thing.
Mhm.
Graham is what upsets everybody, and
Yeah.
Graham. So Graham, he finds a 2-bedroom home duplex thing for what's now about $1,000 a month. So you know, I was getting ready to be very upset about the cost of this apartment, which is like $400 a month at the
Yep.
time. But it's, you know, I think $1,000 a month in Baton Rouge is.
Yeah.
And he never locks his door, so Anne comes by to see how things are doing, and she notices his videotapes, and they all have women's names on them,
Mhm.
and she wants to know if she can watch one, what the deal is, and she learns that Graham has this habit of, instead of having physical sex with women, he interviews them about their sexual histories, sometimes for 3 minutes, sometimes for 6 hours. And then later he watches these and is like, I wonder if it was how deliberate it was on Soderbergh's part to, I mean, he's not classically pounding himself when we see him watching these nude. He's
At this point, Soderbergh talks about it, and I think this is very clear to me. And I don't need the fucking director to tell me this, that something has changed. In the moment that we see him, he is like contemplating this now, but maybe he's not getting what he once got out of this. Because you're right. He's not, when we sort of like catch him wrapped in his sheets watching this, he's not all keyed up. He's just sort of like thinking about this person that he talked to once, or maybe thinking about the people that he has met now, these new relationships he's formed.
He's sort of observing, maybe revisiting the old work.
Yeah.
Sort of like John Anderton in Minority Report watching the hologram video of his wife and child.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
And so Anne's freaked out by this.
I mean, the scene, it's a wonderful scene. Yeah.
It's incredible. With the ice, this is where she spills the iced tea.
This is where she spills the iced tea. He is trying to be, I mean, he's like pitch perfect. Like, I'm weird and I have like a whole new concept of morality, but also I know this is kind of a freaky thing to be saying to somebody. And that he's like trying to play it down and also trying to acknowledge the legitimacy of her feelings. And she's trying to figure out if she's about to die, basically.
Right. And these are people who a few scenes earlier have remarked on how off the freaking wall this guy is wearing a black button-up shirt. Like, what are you, a freaking motorcycle pirate? What are you, what's
three different people comment on his dress in the film, and it's very funny. I mean, he looks good, but Peter Gallagher improvised the line. He looks like an undertaker for the art world, which he looks like.
Yeah.
any
cool.
guy. He looks like the most normal guy.
He looks like so many guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a and I think this is where we first really take notice of like these different ideas of intimacy, where because he mentions in the restaurant scene that he has a theory that you shouldn't. He tried therapy.
Mm-hmm.
And came out of it with a theory that you shouldn't take advice from anyone you haven't been sexually intimate with.
Yes.
Physically intimate with. And then they do a kind of who's on first thing where like, well, why would I take that advice?
Right.
Yeah. And then we, sometime after this, between this and the camcorder or the tape reveal scene, we see Andie MacDowell doing one of the most fucked up things I've ever seen in a movie. Sitting on the same couch as her therapist.
Yes. I noted that as well. Yeah. Played by the great Ron Votter from this theater group, the Wooster Group in New York.
That's with Willem Dafoe.
Yeah.
Wasn't he in the Wooster Group?
I think that's right.
Our pal William Dafoe.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's very funny that like, and MacDowell at one point says even like that she doesn't want to be touched by her husband.
Mm-hmm.
And so she actually is capable of considerable intimacy interpersonally, emotionally.
Yeah.
And he thinks he's at a remove from intimacy because he's not touching anyone,
mm-hmm.
but he's having these extremely intimate conversations or interrogations, sort of consensual interrogations, essentially. And so like they each think that they are like at a remove from other people, but they're just neglecting half of the equation.
Yep.
You know?
And I mean, what's powerful, this scene where suddenly Anne is terrified of this guy when moments earlier, this is like the person that she's maybe felt the closest to in her adult life. And she's known this guy for a couple days, but just the way in which she's been able to talk about things, the sort of like non-possessive approach he has to her, it's obviously had this tremendous impact. She goes in to like watch him sleep because we can see that she's overcome with fascination. She's like Wendy seeing Peter Pan or something, right? This person who's like a type of person I didn't realize could exist. And maybe that's making me realize I could be a different type of person than I thought I was.
Yeah, exactly. Like this is the weird guy coming into the equation and throwing everyone's preconceived notions into disarray.
Yep.
And then she's talking about this with her sister. I don't have this kind of relationship with my sister. I don't have a normal kind of relationship with anyone, but this felt very true to me from what I have seen about other people, especially two sisters, two women who are sisters with each other. The way that they hate each other, but also talk on the phone like every day.
Yes.
And tell each other everything while also having no respect for the other person's like way of thinking or being.
Yes.
And Cynthia is being fucking crazy. Like she immediately wants to find and fuck this man, like claim him sexually, and is like, give me his number, give me his address.
And again, I think initially we're sort of mixing commentary and summary here, but the fact it seems like she's being crazy, but then later we understand more of how Anne treats her, where like basically sort of condescends to her entire way of being, talks about the fact that she doesn't like to have feelings that her sister has. And even though we sympathize with Anne, it's also very obvious that it would be difficult to have a relationship with this person who makes you feel like nothing in your life has any value and your choices are bad. So on the one hand, it is crazy that she's running out to want to go have sex with this dude. But on the other hand, this is like she sees something that is upsetting this person who is constantly upsetting her and realizes like this is a real opportunity for me. And also maybe he just sounds interesting and hot. I don't know. Yeah,
he looks like James Spader in 1989.
Right. So
I think Laura San Giacomo's performance is incredible because you can see the desperation and the who versus behind her behavior while she never says any of those things. Like you can see how much she is doing this. Andie MacDowell's character, it's incredible while also doing a perfectly respectable Southern Louisiana accent or Southern accent, even though she's from New Jersey.
Yeah, I mean, Soderbergh gives her credit. Well, he gives all the actors credit. He cuts a bunch of scenes wisely later after the film is shot, in part because he realizes that the actors just communicate a bunch of things that he thought he had to say later. And he just realized, what great actors are being humans who in their behavior can show you stuff. And he says, Laura San Giacomo in real life was like this demure person who would never behave like this. And he said that she totally inhabited this thing that was a performance because it's nothing like who she is at all.
Yeah. Yeah. So then she shows up at Graham's house, and this is one of the indications that this is this a strange man, where she lets herself into his home, and he goes, can I help you? And like, it's like, what the fuck? It's like, hey, what's up? Who are you? And she explains all of this, and then wants to do the video.
Mm-hmm.
And so she does the video. This is where he asks her about penises. And then she's like she's really moving things along, and like takes her skirt off, and she's not wearing any underwear. And then we learn that she masturbates on the tape. And we learn this when in the next scene, Anne is talking about this with her and doing this puritanical, like, oh my God, I can't believe you did that. Line of questioning that is ultimately exactly what Graham is doing. Like, she's doing it from a, what happened? You masturbated in front of him? And he would say, did you masturbate in front of him?
I mean, this was like an on-set rewrite, but I think there's sort of like a weird back and forth where she says, like, did he touch you? No. Did you touch him? No. Did anybody touch anybody?
Yeah.
And she says, yeah, kind of.
Yeah.
And then she's like, no way. Like, she's sort of like this asking without asking, like you're saying. She's projecting that she doesn't want to know, and yet she's the one pursuing this line of questioning.
Right. But I think this also calls back to her discomfort with even masturbating, because like that is someone touching her. Right. And that's something she's not comfortable with. She also talks about how, she doesn't know if Graham is broadcasting this to some horny old men in South America.
Yeah.
Which, of all the places, I think is fun. I wonder if Hector Babenco liked that.
Yeah, that's a great question. And then Cynthia has her own little arc, because first she's horned up herself. So she calls John and says, like, let's go right now. They have this absolute wild stallion session. And then she kind of blows him off. She's like, you need to leave.
It's interesting. Actors are so interesting. Because Laura San Giacomo, uncomfortable with nudity, totally valid. But is apparently okay with having a big-time orgasmic blast-off while Soderbergh does a Vertigo and Jaws-style dolly zoom.
Yeah.
Which, like, I think I would rather take my shirt off than pretend to achieve climax on camera. Except if I would do the I'll have what she's having funny version of it. But I can't say that in a deli now because I don't eat meat, Most of the time I can't have what she's having. I'm not going to eat that.
Great point.
So yeah, she blasts off, and there's been this question raised about Cynthia's earring.
Mm-hmm.
And she's been very weird on the sort of award circuit.
Who's
Cynthia's
that?
Earring? She's crying a lot, very thin. And then this is just great filmmaking stuff when we see Anne vacuuming aggressively.
Mm-hmm.
And
some of the craziest cleaning in the world. She's like wiping her.
Yeah. Reminded me of Safe, the film Safe, which I think is dealing with some of the same kind of post-Reagan suburban repression stuff. But and then we hear the telltale clatter. And first I'm thinking, she ran over Lego Jake Sully. I've heard this noise before. But then she flips her vacuum over, and this is where the movie bumps for me, because as a person with a famous podcast girlfriend whose hair texture is quite similar to that of Andy McDowell's, hold your applause. But she's not flipping over that vacuum and seeing a perfectly clean brush roll. That is absurd.
I see, yeah.
That thing is near death at all times. But anyway, she finds the earring because, and this is how she learns, her husband's been fucking her sister in her bed, and Cynthia specifically said that she wanted to have sex with her sister's husband in her sister's bed because like that's how much she hates her sister.
Yeah,
or
and we
is
admitted
angry
this,
at.
but at this point, Anne has already tried to confront John because she suspects that he's cheating on her, and she even plays with the idea that he may be cheating on her with her sister. And John does the absolute, I was like, classically male manipulation thing of,
I can't believe you'd ask me that.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes. I have feelings and we haven't had sex in a long time and I've been respectful of that. And I don't think you're cheating on me. So why would you think I'm cheating on you, as if those were equivalent situations?
Yeah. He's so nasty. He's both the number 1 and number 2 worst kind of guy.
He is. Yeah. So
I know a lot of lawyer jokes because all my family is lawyers. Do you want to hear some of them?
Yeah, give me one.
What's the difference between a dead lawyer lying in the road and a dead snake lying in the road?
I don't know what.
There are skid marks before the snake.
Okay.
That's just one.
Yeah.
We'll return with more lawyer jokes
right.
next episode. And so she finds out that they have been fucking, and then we get the great scene where does she confront him immediately, or does she?
No. She runs.
She goes to Graham.
Yeah, she goes to Graham.
I noticed this. She changes into an outfit that matches Graham.
Yes. I mean, this is the type of stuff that sometimes reading about a filmmaker's decisions, she is supposed to be wearing John's clothes for housework, and she tears them off because they are, and this is Stephen in his notes says, like, is anybody in the theater going to think about this? I think the answer is no.
No, but it might inform the performance or something.
Yeah.
I think it's fine, Steve.
Yeah. So she takes all this off and then she dresses like Graham and goes to see
She
Graham.
wears black top and blue jeans.
Yep.
And goes to Graham, and she wants to do the tape, and
he initially says, no, I don't think you would do this in your normal frame of mind. It seems like you're upset.
He also was aware of the affair but didn't say anything because he didn't think it was his place, and also she has been afraid of him. She ran away.
Right.
So I think he's fine. So they start doing the sort of questionnaire, but then she turns the tables on him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only going to interrupt you because we don't actually see this happen at this moment.
Right, because we have Gallagher show up at Graham's house.
Yeah, we actually see the confrontation so we see her get to Graham's house and they talk about making the tape, and then we cut away.
Right.
And then she says to her husband, I want a divorce. He
I
says,
want out of this marriage.
Exactly.
And then she says, fuck you. Yeah.
Which is really good. Yeah.
Got to get that on the soundboard.
Yeah. And then she tells him that she went and made a tape with Graham. He can't believe it. I mean, throughout this whole thing, Peter Gallagher's character has sort of been expressing his objection to these women making tapes, not because, I mean, he frames it as you might, like you said, did you sign a contract? He could be selling this, but he's also sort of being possessive and saying you,
of course, yeah.
How did you do this in front of him? Whatever. And then, so he runs out, goes to Graham's house, wakes him
Decks him.
We get a little wake up scene that reminded me of that classic Vine where a girl's asleep and has her hand put
They pour the water on her?
They pour water on her. You're right. Pours the water on her, and she wakes up and says, hello.
Hello? Yeah. It's one of Amanda's favorite things in the entire world.
Well, here we get Graham waking up in the dark of his room and saying, what?
Yeah.
And then Peter Gallagher punches him, pushes him out of the room, watches Anne's tape, and then we sort of go into the tape.
Yeah, we get this really great shot where you can see the silhouette of John in the chair inside. We're outside of the house, and you see the kind of bloody-nosed James Spader out on the porch, and then through the window, through the curtain, we can see the silhouette of Peter Gallagher watching the TV. This is an observation I have, I'm seconding from Griffin Newman of the Blank Check podcast, but we lost so much when consumer shot footage started to look roughly the same as movie footage, because just the different levels of the obvious difference between camcorder footage and 35 millimeter reads so much better, so much more interesting.
Mhm.
There's an obvious remove, and then when we see her on the camera and then we cut to that scene,
Right.
has such an effect. There's something very, very interesting I noticed throughout the movie, where there's a lot of phone conversations where we hear the other side of the phone conversation.
Yes.
But there's no audio effect on the other person to make it sound like they're coming through the phone. We just hear their voice. It's kind of Brechtian
Yeah.
thing. So when we jump through the screen, essentially, before we do that, when we see Anne on the TV, the music is also quite sort of horror movie like, and so it anticipates The Ring in a way that
It's
I was
true.
not expecting. But it is spooky. It's like snuffy,
Yeah.
you know.
And then we get the sort of climactic scene of the film, which is
The table turning.
the table turning. Yeah. So this is the making of the tape. We return to Graham saying, okay, let's make the tape. She says, what do we have to do? And then they get started talking about sex. And what do we find out? I mean, what unfolds here?
Well, what eventually unfolds is that we get the famous shot of her standing in the doorway. She's not pointing the camera at Graham anymore. She's talking to him. She's removed I think the camera might still be on, but she's removed this sort of this mediated discussion.
Yeah.
And she's telling him, he's saying, like, my problems are my own. I'm not connected to anyone. And she says, you think they're yours, but they're not. Everyone that walks in that door becomes part of your problem. You've had an effect on my life. And he said, this isn't supposed to happen.
Yeah, this was an on-the-day rewrite between him, Spader, and Andy
Whoa.
McDowell. Yeah, this is like the main
That's crazy.
scene of the film.
This is the main part of the movie. Yeah.
And the speech, initially, I quoted this, I think, on our autofocus episode, maybe, where, you talked about what I think it begins saying, Spader saying, why do I have to explain myself to you? You don't know who I am. You don't have the slightest idea who I am. Am I supposed to recount all the points in my life leading up to this moment and just hope that it's coherent? That it makes some sort of sense to you? It doesn't make any sense to me. I was there. So
Yeah.
all of this was just like, they just felt this thing happening. And I think it's great.
Cool.
It borders on being too explicit, but I think, as I said in the autofocus episode, the reason I think it works is because both of these people are totally comprehensible, expressing something that I think makes perfect sense for them and for all people. He's saying, like, look.
Yeah, it's like things that they've clearly never said before, but it's all coming together for them in the moment. Yeah.
Exactly. So he's saying, like, look, I'm not in love with you. Why do I have to articulate what our relationship is? And she's basically saying, you have to articulate it because we have a relationship. We have made contact with each other, and you have to understand that I want to help you, but also we've just affected each other. So you can't pretend that this remove exists between us.
Yeah, and then she touches him.
Yeah, then they have like non-heteronormative sex, kind of.
They maybe have outer course, which is one of the worst neologisms that there is.
Yeah,
and but we also don't see it. We cut away from it, and so like the movie seems like it might be puritanical at times. Like the movie seems like it's threatening maybe to be sex negative, but I think it's, to me, really more about like restoring value to physical touch. Because you
I
then
don't think
get
it's sex
like
negative at all.
When she touches his face, I just mean like there's a chance before this that it could be heading in that direction. But she touches his face and it's like,
well, she takes his hand and makes his hand touch her face, I think, also.
She does that, yeah. Like Lionel Richie music video.
Right.
And it just kind of exalts the physical touch. Like it I think the movie is calling for just more, I don't know, intentionality to sexual contact. And and doing it because you want to with this person, not doing it at your sister to piss her off or whatever. And they seem to have some intimacy off camera.
Yeah. We cut back to John watching this, and I also think this is a wonderful moment because he is also transformed in that I don't think this is like he's been taught a lesson necessarily in those simple terms. He is watching a videotape of somebody he thought he both understood and also had dominated. And he is watching something that is like more intimate than any contact he's had with her, maybe in a long time, maybe never. And suddenly he's sort of like aware of what is not in his life and what is beyond the remove of this tape, right? He's watching a screen as we are. And yet it does affect him. He walks out, and I actually don't think he talks with malice. He goes outside and he tells Graham, there's this woman that you've been obsessed with, his ex-girlfriend, sort of been this little subplot in the film, Elizabeth. And he says, I had sex with her. She wasn't a saint. There's no reason for you to be hung up on this person. So
Right.
Actually, it seems like he's saying it to humiliate him, but I don't read it that way. It seems more like...
Yeah, I mean, so I watched Carnal Knowledge in anticipation of this because Soderbergh talks so much about its heavy influence on this film. Good movie. This is a controversial take.
Yeah.
Carnal Knowledge, good film.
He talks about 3 movies being big influences: Carnal Knowledge, The Last Picture Show, and 5 Easy Pieces.
5 Easy Pieces.
I think that's a 3 for 3 for our guy here. And the connections are extremely explicit. I think if you go watch those, it's almost ridiculous how
Right.
like these movies are related to this movie.
But Carnal Knowledge, for those who haven't seen, it goes in more linear order, but it is about 2 friends played by Jack Nicholson and Arthur Garfunkel, as he's credited in the famous podcast girlfriend said, imagine being the uglier guy in a pairing with Paul Simon.
Oh,
Fucking
damn, rest in peace.
No Scope from the Moon. Yeah, rest in peace, both of them. Yeah. But it's about 2 men who initially it's all about men's relationship with sex and with women, and this question of like, when are men more themselves when they're with other men talking about, getting some strange, or when they are with these women that they are pursuing and trying to be like emotionally present. And the relationship is I think defined when early on in the film the Art Garfunkel character falls in love with Candice Bergen, but then secretly the Jack Nicholson character starts dating Candice Bergen as well, and they lose their virginities together first before she does with Art Garfunkel, and later marries. Those characters marry, although we never see the Candice Bergen character again. So there's this kind of this college betrayal hanging over the relationship. But I think in Carnal Knowledge we never find out. I'm not sure. Yeah, we never find out.
Yeah, I think that's right.
For sure. But I think a very effective kind of reimagining or retelling of that, and I wonder how much Soderbergh is telling on himself. He says that all these characters are kind of aspects of himself.
Yes, classic.
I went to college with Siri.
Oh. What are you suggesting here? Is that...
I think maybe she's just like telling us.
Oh, okay.
Sort of like she's associating.
I
She
see.
only got in because Steve Jobs made a call to his friend who was the dean of the treating your cancer with fruit and fucking dying department.
Okay. So is this
That's
like a
that
real
was brutal, Gibby. Yeah, yes.
Was any of this story like real, or is it just sort of a setup?
Just to be.
I heard he refused chemotherapy after a psychic told him the iPod would eventually lead to the creation of this podcast.
Okay, so
okay.
I
So
think
maybe it was a setup for 2
the
mean
whole
things. So you
thing.
could say, yeah,
Damn,
that's
she's like a
interesting.
regular Lisa Lampanelli over here.
So the film...
Kimmy's not invited on the show anymore. The film then goes on to, we see the fallout of this compulsive sexual behavior on John's career. We learn, I think, that their marriage has fallen apart when he's spewing a lot of hot air about how, work comes first.
Right.
And if that's not enough for Anne, then, so be it.
Yeah.
And then we find out that Mr. Kirkland has sought representation elsewhere because this guy blew him off several times.
Yep.
Even though this was his first big case as junior partner.
Mm-hmm. And then we get a reconciliation between sisters, which I also think is a cool choice. Maybe it's being optimistic, but We see there's no blow up scene about her being mad at her sister. She seems to realize what was motivating everybody involved, including herself, and they don't even talk out their feelings. They just say like, "Hey, you can call me later if you want." And she says, "I would love to call you later at your work." She's working again now.
Shares her phone number.
Yep.
And I didn't even notice this, but in the IMDb trivia, it says that at one point Anne pulls her hair back and reveals that she's wearing the earring.
Oh, I didn't notice that either.
Yeah,
interesting.
The vacuum earring.
Weird. Okay.
So that's nice. And there's a sense that also, this is, I think, part of the film's sort of sex positivity, is there's a sense that we can, even sexual betrayals can be overcome and are not the most important things in, in
emotional
the world.
Understanding is more important than anything else. Yeah.
What's up, dude?
And then we get the closing scene, which also was a Spader-McDowell collaboration. They came up with this.
Movie end. End of the movie. Yeah. I mean, good movie. Hit a lot harder for me this time.
Happy to hear
appreciate
it.
it.
Happy to hear it. Yeah. I mean, let's talk about. So one of the things for me is we're talking about this experience of sex, this gendered experience of sex. But the reason that this film crushes so much for me is that at any given moment, we can see sex and just relationships generally as something that people are sharing and also experiencing themselves. It's like neither the extreme of solipsism of like what's happening to you is happening in your mind, your relationship to these things is your relationship, but it's also not a fully shared social reality. We can't pretend that like what I say is what you hear, what I think you feel is what you're feeling. When I say sex, we're talking about the same thing because... Are
you about to bust out some object-oriented ontology right now?
Sound like that, but no.
Sounds like this sort of dead-end field of philosophy that I wrote a paper about in college.
Oh, yes.
Because a professor was
Shout out to Brian Kim. Yeah.
Yeah. Shout out to Brian Kim Steffens.
Yes.
It's very well put that there are relationships. Everyone has a relationship to one another and also to themselves, and those relationships are interacting in their own way. And I think, politically, the film doesn't seem to be obviously doing a lot politically outside of the personal is political sort of thing and the questions about like sexual mores specifically at this moment. But Soderbergh said, he told an interviewer, "I've been like Cynthia when there was a political content to my relationships with women," which is interesting in a couple of ways because she doesn't say much politically. So he's sort of telling us what he thinks of Cynthia more than the movie does.
Yep.
And then also, like, what does that mean? Like, is he talking about trying to make, like, I don't know, intentional non-monogamy part of his personal politics in some way?
You talked about this like, okay, we've achieved a sexual revolution, at least in theory. What does that look like for a single person? I mean, Cynthia, she's always saying like, my life doesn't revolve around this affair. You can leave. This is not like,
I don't care.
Exactly. This is not the essence of being for me. But we also see that that's kind of true, but it's not as simple as just her political feelings about something. And you mentioned Anne in therapy is always bringing up these sort of social issues of the day. She talks about the garbage. In the original script, she talks about the potential of becoming homeless, that homeless women were career women, that they were people who had apartments, that this could happen anytime.
Which I wish was in the movie.
Me too. I mean, but what's interesting is I think that Soderbergh is not being super flattering about how genuine her interest is in these things. She talks about poor, starving children in Africa later.
These are anxieties, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the therapist sort of tries to probe her about whether this is just like terrible stuff that she can't change, that she can focus on because it's not her life. And I don't know that...
Never heard about that from a therapist. Never heard that in my life from any therapist. Definitely not from more than one.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think it's dismissive to say that, but I do think Soderbergh is not saying like Anne has all these great observations about politics in the world. And I sort of got a slightly Schraderian feel of a lot of people's interest in politics is sort of like psychoanalytical displacement or something. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I think that can be the case. It doesn't make the cause itself
that is the
illegitimate
big question. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I do think for a lot of folks, you might need to get your own shit sorted before you can start helping sort out broader, more collective shit if it's going to get in the way of your
it can be responsible, but also
your work.
It is legitimate to see that as a problem that you are involved with, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There is a lot of garbage.
There's a lot of garbage. Yeah. I rewatched 5 Easy Pieces for this. There's a really, really wonderful line where I don't know if you recall that they pick up like a gay couple of women hitchhikers.
Is this Tony Basil and
exactly.
And
very good. Yeah.
Hey, Mickey.
So, and one of them says like, the world's so full of crap now. It's all just junk full of crap. And she keeps talking about this stuff. And she's clearly like unhinged and doesn't, has a terrible relationship with her girlfriend.
Presents a potential solution to the trash problem, though.
Which is
everyone takes a little bit of the garbage and shoves it up their ass.
Yeah, that's a great point. You're absolutely
Did you have the experience I did of watching 5 Easy Pieces and getting to that scene and realizing that the weird little sketch about chicken nuggets on the Tenacious D album was a reference to 5 Easy Pieces?
I didn't, but I do know the sketch you're talking about. I mean, that album was heavy rotation in high school for me. Yeah, well, that's how it plays.
Uh-huh.
So you're telling me that you're also thinking, we talked about Reagan, but what is this moment? I mean, this is
the end of the Reagan 80s. This is so kind of the welfare state, the New Deal order has been pretty thoroughly stripped. Although we're learning recently that there was actually even more to strip out. We didn't realize.
Yep.
But this is the me generation. This is the firm turn toward like personal enrichment away from any kind of collective thinking among particularly just white people and like middle class to upper class white people.
Yep.
And it's notable that the film takes place in the South and has some prudishness, but does not really include any religion at all, because this was also the kind of birth of the religious right and the courting of the religious right by politicians, particularly. But we're looking at family values coming back into becoming like a sort of a culture war issue. And also, we're toward the end of the Cold War. Like there isn't it's sort of us versus us
all of a sudden
at this point. And it is notable that twice we see Cynthia wearing what I assume are surplus Bundeswehr T-shirts, the German army, the West German army, one of which has been tie-dyed. So there's a kind of, I think there's just a sense that this is purely aesthetic. This is like a...
Yeah, politics doesn't exist for individuals. Right. I mean, I think it's a great point. I think for Soderbergh, and we're going to talk about this for his other movies, but the fact that these people's encounters with each other, they are definitely tied up in social issues. I mean, I think Soderbergh, we talked about his father being a...
Steven Soderbergh.
That's right. Being a left-leaning academic who's aware of all these forces playing on the world, but he is mostly exploring them vis-a-vis like individuals interacting with other individuals, and those are the biggest forces in these people's lives. I mean, I think, again, compared to something like 5 Easy Pieces, also a tumultuous political time, and yet all we are seeing is people sort of having to confront themselves, not even for like big dramatic reasons, right? I think I get the sense in this film that this just as easily could have not happened, right? We could see Anne and John living the rest of their lives together. This was not, and some people have inflection points that don't amount to anything in their lives. And I think, this film is sort of saying like, is there a moment where there is misogyny? I mean, John in the film, in a couple scary moments, I was sort of talking about his sexual possessiveness, but he also almost hits Anne when she is saying like, we should get a divorce. And I don't know if this film is saying like, this is a social problem, but rather like, this is people's lives. And maybe part of that comes from their environments, but they don't really experience it as like a capital E environment. They just experience it as like me and my husband.
I do wonder how much Like if we were to take a time machine,
Mm-hmm.
like Samantha Mumba and Guy Pearce, if we were to take one of those back to 1989 Baton Rouge, like I wonder how much it would feel evangelical, or how much it would feel like a more of a mix of different ways of being. Because I think right now it would probably feel. I've never been to Baton Rouge, but I've been to various parts of the South more recently, and they feel like everyone there is a revival tent frothing, like a person whose whole conception of the world is very different than mine, and they want to violently bring me into compliance with that. But I wonder at the time if, would you cross paths with metalheads and arty types in black shirts and all of this? You seem like you're excited to tell me something.
No, I had the same. I'm excited because you
funny.
and I were on the same page, and this is kind of a trick of filmmaking, particularly intellectual filmmaking, that I almost think of as it's a trick that's a trap. One of these tricky traps.
Trick trap.
Where we watch this and say, this is just us. This is the same. Nothing has changed.
Mm-hmm.
It feels like going back to 1989 would be seamless.
Might as well have Chrissy Metz and Milo Ventimiglia on screen.
Exactly.
The way This Is Us.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This is us. And yet that's not the case, right? And this is kind of what I wonder, obviously in our moment, we are aware of social collapse and ongoing active repression and rights that are being dragged back. And I'm curious whether someone like Soderbergh, who makes this film where those things aren't explicit, how much that's on his mind. Like, is he thinking about what is the deal with his moments? Because I agree with you. Watching this, you think this guy is just sort of like in time. This could take place in 1955. This could take place in 2020. It would be a transition with no noticeable difference.
Well, with the exception of Cynthia, I think. Because I think Cynthia is the person who is the most responding to. Like, she would not feel as... I don't know that she could as half-consciously slip into this particular type of person who's like, fuck tradition, fuck puritanicalism. I'm a liberated woman, as much as like in the 50s, for example. I think that would be.
I was going to say now. I feel like that totally still exists, but you're saying further back. For sure.
I think further back. But I mean, unfortunately, I don't think that much has changed at all. So it would be pretty much the same move nowadays.
Yeah, I mean that's the weirdness of it, though. We've talked previously on the podcast about like how easy it is to forget advancements, particularly in things like feminist rights and protections for women and people of color. I was doing some,
and particularly when our parents have been pretty much fine the whole time. Like if we had parents who were people of color who could tell us, who had told us our whole lives about like, it was really bad until like 2 years ago.
I mean, I think yes and no, because I got to tell you, man, I've worked in lots of different activist communities, and sometimes it's shocking to see the extent to which people who in their lives have seen things improve have adapted so quickly that they no longer notice what's improved, and they sort of think like, oh, everything's been fine for a long time. I mean, I was doing a bit of contextual reading about like 1980s legal advancements for women. And first of all, you got things like 1981, Kirchberg v. Feenstra, a woman finally gets the end of what are called head and master rights, which is the fact that your husband has final say about property decisions and can do it without your consent or knowledge.
Jesus,
just as a bit of context, this law came about because a wife sued her husband, not initially about this problem. She brought him to court because she was saying that he had molested their daughter.
Jesus.
And the fact that he mortgaged their house without telling her to get a defense attorney, that's what became the issue. That's what became this huge deal. But this is the context we're talking about, right? We're talking about people. There was another big case where a woman was working at a bank and she was coerced to have sex with her boss like 40 or 50 times, and she started not showing up for work. And this was the first time that you could say there was a hostile work environment because you were being sexually harassed by somebody at your work. These are like super basic things that we take for granted, as if you ask somebody today, well, of course you have workplace protections about your boss harassing you. I mean, these came about like a couple of years before you and I were born, and then some of them didn't really take hold. Some of them aren't really in place now. So you can still get sexually harassed by your boss, obviously.
Yeah, it happens all the time. I'm looking up also this film comes out a few years before the election of the first woman to the Louisiana Supreme Court bench, and
I believe that.
One more year than that before the election of the first African-American justice on the court, who was a man. So
exactly.
So yeah, I mean, and then I'm sure we've talked in previous episodes. Go find them, but there's always those crazy stories about how there's some law that technically allows like Black people without identification to be like put back into slavery that are on the books until like 1997. You know?
Exactly. I mean, they don't have FMLA protection until you and I are both alive. I mean, things that we think of course you get time off from work for being pregnant. Actually, no, you could just be fired for being pregnant.
Don't ask, don't tell stuff. Yeah. You've come a long way, baby.
Yeah.
That's what I learned from a poster. But yeah, I mean, I think there's a guy. It's weird because in the Criterion edition has a bunch of like set photos and sort of behind the scenes stuff. Specifically, this little featurette on the sound mix. And there's guys working on this movie that have there's a guy with a T-shirt said like Georgia born or something, and then had a Confederate flag on it. And he's working on this movie, you know, and he's probably like a perfectly nice guy who didn't really think about that. I mean, he could have been a piece of shit, to be clear, but like. This is we're not yet at the point where it's obvious to anyone. It
definitively means you're a piece of shit. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, for
where
sure.
a person who wants to make sure that they're not like being a dickhead would know not to get the Confederate flag T-shirt.
Yep.
Soderbergh also wearing a Cleveland Indians hat in some of these.
He definitely is. Yes.
Photos as well. So we things have changed.
Yeah.
Big time.
Things have changed, and I guess my point is it's easy to miss.
Yeah.
Particularly if you're in the right or the wrong milieu where you feel like, oh, we're safe and things are fine.
But helpfully, I think we're all learning that was not set in stone. That was something that could have been taken away at any time. I did really enjoy the line, especially from a podcasty perspective of when they're talking about where Graham's going to get an apartment, and some
yes,
Anne suggests the Garden District, and John says, "Oh, there's critical crime in the Garden District." Critical crime.
I mean, Peter Gallagher is a comedic genius in this movie. I think he decided great. One of the things he decided, like in his acting prep process, was that John would use the word critical a lot. So in that same in that same scene, he's just like an absolute piece of shit talking about his wife's cooking and says, oh
my God,
it wasn't bad today, honey. Usually she achieves kind of a critical mass of salt. And I always tell her, you can add more salt, but you can't take it away. And
that's so fucked. That made me so mad.
The dynamic where she's like, you do tell me that. Just like the most miserable married people.
Yeah. What a schmuck. There's I mean, much has been made of the gliding camera, the kind of lurking, almost voyeuristic camera where it's like, what is moving? Why are we moving?
Mm-hmm.
It feels sort of predatory in a way, or like
invasive or
stalking. Yeah. And then interestingly, I did note that during the Anne tape, the camcorder does the same kind of glide.
It's true.
Which we hadn't really seen before.
Mm-hmm.
So that's cool.
In this film, I don't know. Aside from the fact that I think it's wonderful, I don't think it's the most subtle film in the world. But like you said, I actually think that the rewarding stuff is not in like the text discussion even necessarily. It's in the details of how people interact and how they change their minds about things and the unspoken dialogue here. I do think there's a warmth in this movie, and you're talking about a closeness that I'm not sure Soderbergh ever returns to. And we can see, I mean, I know, there's things like Out of Sight that have heat and have
big time,
like human warmth, and even Magic Mike, of course.
Magic Mike, yeah.
But I don't know that it's the same to me. There's not this like wanting to be very close, wanting to achieve intimacy with the people we're looking at. And I'm curious why that might be.
That kindness And that, physical closeness that is achieved at the end of this movie, he seems not to have resolved that maybe in his personal life. And so these ideas, this idea of the alienation, the physical and emotional remove returns, and a lot of characters are at odds with their loved ones, and sometimes this isn't exactly resolved in favor of the greater conflict with like the big economic force or whatever that the little guy is fighting against in a lot of these movies. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to track. He also he wrote this, and he writes a lot of screenplays before he makes this, but he's not primarily a writer in his career.
Yeah, he already had like 4 or 5 complete screenplays that he was trying to shop around and get interest for, and he has a couple more lined up shortly after this that I'm sure we'll talk about in our next episode. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. It's odd. He even notes in his diary that he says he thinks he's going to prefer to mostly direct his own stuff because he feels that connection to the material, and then that may not be the case. Do you have any other major things to talk about in the film itself?
Not in the film. I mean, I did want to mention, we talked about this a little bit in our intro episode, but just the knock-on effect of the success of this movie.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
So the movie gets picked up by Miramax, Harvey Weinstein, and his brother Bob Weinstein's company. Mm-hmm. They buy the movie. They do something rather innovative with the release strategy where they put basically a real movie, a studio movie's level of money into promotion and distribution. They put it on like 500 screens.
Yeah.
After an initial limited release, but they platform it, but then they put it in like regular multiplexes, like at the mall, and it does really well. It makes what is it, $60 million or something on a budget of 1.2.
Yep. And this is, I can't even characterize this as an accident because Soderbergh, I mean, this was made with RCA Columbia, and Columbia, after he finishes the movie, says, "We love this. We want to distribute this," and he freaks out. He's like, I really don't want them to distribute this because I don't want a studio to do studio stuff to this where they sort of like disrespect it. And he says in the first meeting, they said like, we're going to do an off the street test screening where we grab people to watch this and get their reactions. And he's like, this is my nightmare. So yeah, I mean, he knows what he wants and he knows the type of people he's trying to reach. And this is what the Weinsteins offer him.
And then that gives them the capital to invest and Pulp Fiction.
Yep.
And then the rest is the freaking 90s, baby. But I think this kicks off, this is like identified as the kickoff of like a 90s independent cinema wave that then gets pretty quickly co-opted by the major studios and you know, what's sometimes called Indiewood, where they all have these kind of, they develop these arms that do that
your Sony Picture
like
Classics
farm
and like your,
teams, and Paramount Vantage and Fox Searchlight, Focus, all these things. Searchlight might have come later, but like that those kind of labels that are ways for major studios to find a smaller filmmaker and do their own kind of specialty films that sometimes cross over. And like with Pulp Fiction, you get a lot of sort of sexualized and videotape riffs. I don't want to say rip-offs, but movies that are clearly like inspired by this or maybe trying to catch the wave.
Yeah.
Adults talking movies, you know, adults talking frankly.
Yeah.
I don't think any of them has really risen to the level.
Nope. I don't think so either. Yeah.
But this is like a major film in the history of Hollywood. Oddly.
I know.
When you watch the movie, it's like a nice little movie. You know?
Yeah, it's super small. I mean, throughout the making of it, he keeps telling them, like, I want it to be small. Go small in the acting. I don't expect this to make huge waves. And to be fair, he pioneered some of this stuff, but he didn't invent it. I mean, he talks about sitting on a panel discussion. I forget if I think it's at Cannes, with Jim Jarmusch and like a bunch of other independent filmmakers. And he feels intimidated because Jarmusch is saying, like, if you have producers, then you're in somebody's pocket and you're like a piece of shit. And he feels like he's not real independent filmmaker. Yeah.
Yeah, because Stranger Than Paradise had come out a couple of years before this.
Yeah, and I think this was Mystery Train was the one that Jarmusch was promoting at the time. And so it's not like he was the first guy to do independent filmmaking, but he is the first guy to do this, like you're saying, indie wood, wide release thing for adults that is arty, but also pretty accessible. I think this film is not super challenging.
No, I think so. And then, cut to Garden State coming out and
Right.
Soderbergh doing
Yes.
the Oppenheimer face where he puts his hand to his temple.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And this obviously gets him a lot of attention from Hollywood. They're like, oh shit, who's this guy?
Oh, yeah.
The Sundance connection gets him
Redford.
hooked up with Robert Redford, Mr.
Yeah.
Sundance himself. That's why it's called that, obviously.
Uh-huh.
Also, Sidney Pollack. You can see interest of Sidney Pollack.
He does. Yeah, and he has his pick of projects, so much so that people are getting mad. Like, he promises Redford's people that they're going to go do King of the Hill, and Redford reads the book. And but at the same time, he has this screenplay that he's a big fan of by this guy named Lem Dobbs called Kafka that
Yes.
he wants
It's
to be
written
the
in the
champion
70s.
of. Yeah. And then he has this project called The Last Ship that maybe we'll talk about next time. It's like,
Yeah.
he puts everything else, King of the Hill, Kafka, all that stuff. He's like, it has to be on the back burners because I'm going to make The Last Ship.
And yes, that is what became the like TNT
Yeah.
television show starring Eric Dane,
Yes.
produced by Michael Bay, about a ship after the apocalypse. There's
Right.
like the last people on a ship. Interesting guy.
Yeah.
Interesting guy.
So let's
Eric
see.
Dane, I mean.
Yeah. Very,
Stephen
very
Swede.
interesting guy.
Eric Dane.
That's right.
Anything about it? Do you have any last thoughts?
No, I mean, we're about to take the turn into the famous decade of madness of Soderbergh.
Yeah, the doldrums, the repeated, the sophomore slump that goes on for like 5 movies.
Right. And I think we'll find out why maybe that happened. What is Soderbergh interested in that has no audience appeal? Was it there before? What's the issue here? But this was a huge deal. I think it's an incredible first film.
Mhm.
I do want to say very quickly, we actually get 2 top 10s in his book. So as kind of a
Okay,
Soderbergh
please.
check-in, because he's so effusive about the films that he likes. So I'm not going to do them both, but his revised top 10 after he finishes this movie.
Like top 10 movies.
Yeah. All the President's Men, Annie Hall, Citizen Kane, The Conversation, The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T, The Godfather Parts 1 and 2, Jaws, The Last Picture Show, Sunset Boulevard, and The Third Man.
So this guy sounds about 26 years
Yeah.
old.
That's
I mean, these are all
like
good
AFI
movies.
top
Yeah.
films.
It's just like not that interesting of a top
No,
10.
that's
but
what
they're all
yeah.
good movies.
That is kind of interesting to me, though, that he is.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
he is so many of us, and he's watching Cronenberg stuff, and he's like, "This is great." Coen
Sure.
Brothers stuff, this is great. I don't know. He's just like the most stereotypical '90s filmmaker to me in terms of his interest, and
Right.
yet he kind of creates his own thing. It's weird that this guy that is like a classic guy to me made a big splash, did something totally different.
Yeah. Classic guys and videotape.
Yep.
Is that anything?
Yeah, it could be.
Kimmy, do you have any final thoughts?
For me, loyalty is everything. Omerta baby.
Okay. I'm going to keep that in mind.
Yeah, that's something to remember as we deal with Kimmy. Thank you,
Yeah.
Kimmy.
I guess now I'm wondering about your ethnic roots, Kimmy.
I don't wonder about anyone's
Okay.
ethnic roots. I don't think that that's something to be
Smart. That's
focused
smart
on.
of you. Yeah.
We have, of course, the segment Going Haywire. So one of the ways we close out the show.
Yep.
Kimmy, you want to kick that off for us?
Now it's time for Going Haywire, the part of the show where we pick which character from the film we'd most like to see overdubbed by actress Laura San Giacomo.
San Giacomo.
What do you think, man?
Look, it's always silly to do this when she's in the film.
Yeah.
But the friggin' everybody. What if she did everybody? What if it was like a
Being John Malkovich.
Anomalisa with
yeah.
Tom Noonan? What if she
Mhm.
did everybody's voice? What about you?
Well, I'm going to immediately break the format of this. And I'm going to say, I was thinking about the fact that Spader, obviously, we didn't really discuss. He's like the face of rethinking your relationship to sex in the 90s and 2000s.
Right.
Because he makes Crash and also Secretary.
Yeah.
So I think is that Maggie Gyllenhaal? That's the secretary.
Maggie. Yeah.
I think she should overdub Laura San Giacomo's role in this film.
That's interesting, and
I
I
was
think
thinking sort
that
of Batman style. I was thinking about
right,
Yeah.
and I think that Jake Gyllenhaal should be in Secretary now.
Okay, great.
As the Maggie character.
Yeah,
to be clear,
Oh.
that wasn't.
Oh,
I didn't
gotcha.
mean the other thing.
Yep.
Real quick, I would be remiss. We mentioned the Gallagher character's name is John Mulaney.
Mm-hmm.
The film was produced and distributed by Harvey Weinstein.
Yep.
I would be remiss if I did not play the following clip from John Mulaney and Nick Kroll's 2018 opening monologue to the Independent Spirit Awards.
Wow.
Do you remember this?
I don't know if I even know about this.
Okay, that's fine. Here we go.
This is a true story. I met Harvey Weinstein once. This was in 2015 for a meeting, and he was complaining to me in the meeting that Weinstein TV took up too much of his time. Yeah. And he said, and I quote, "Yeah, no one's going to remember my movies. Forget Pulp Fiction. My tombstone is going to say Project Runway." You don't got to worry anymore, Harvey. It's not going to say Project Runway. It's going to say XXL Unmarked Grave.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that's one of the best jokes I think I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very good.
Shout out to that guy. Another guy with a normal relationship with his wife.
I thought you were going to make that joke about John Mulaney.
I mean, that's none of our business, though. He's not in the movie,
Yeah. I mean, wasn't her name Anne specifically?
Her name is Anna Marie. Yeah.
Wow.
I did think about that, but that's where we all learned about parasociality.
We sure
happened.
did. Yep.
When a guy simply his marriage seems to have fallen apart based maybe on both people having some stuff to work out. I don't know. I wasn't there.
Sort of SLV style. These are not like most of the bad things we do to each other aren't crimes. They're just like not well thought out and hard to navigate.
Yeah, people hurt each other's feelings, but I don't know. I don't know that guy.
Nope, me neither.
Pretty funny joke though.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. And then Soderbergh also apparently has written a sequel to this. He wrote it in COVID times.
Oh, a real sequel, not Full Frontal.
No, a real sequel about Anne and Cynthia sort of reconnecting when I believe Cynthia's daughter is getting married. And I think both of them, both McDowell and LSG are like, yeah, I'll do it. But now he's got to get money from I assume it'll be funded by the Saudis and she's getting married in Riyadh.
Right.
Okay. So look forward to that coming out on Bacardi Plus.
Yeah, that's going to be really good.
I guess that wouldn't add up. They don't
really go big on that stuff over there.
They don't really go big on that stuff.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about going haywire soon myself.
That's been
you
clear.
Keep hinting at that. I don't know. You're saying stuff about being able to hold knives in the real world last week. So.
Yeah. And by the way, if you are trying to track the canonical statements of Kimmy, I would suggest you don't, because we are not doing that. So there's no Kimmy canon. She's just sort of it's like in like a cartoon where it all resets at the end of the episode.
Yes, exactly.
That is about going to do it for our Sex, Lies, and Videotape episode. We did it. I was so nervous, Anne herself.
Yeah, yep. And now here you are, orgasming.
I'm ready to. Now I'm masturbating with my attackers. Remember that? That's pretty cool.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. We'll be back in 2 weeks with Kafka. If you want more of us before then, go on over to patreon.com/podcasty for me, where we will be talking about something else. Also, remember to subscribe, rate us, write a review. It helps us on the algorithm. If you like the show, tell a friend, tell your dad, tell a Sony camcorder. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Podcasty for me. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or you're interested in co-hosting a two-person Steven Soderbergh podcast, you can email us at podcastyforme@gmail.com. All this is at podcastyforme.com and shootingyourselfinthehead.com. Thank you to Jeremy Allison for our artwork. And we'll catch you in Prague.
Bye.
Hey, yes.